And we're live. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our virtual event with Daven McQueen, the author of Invincible Summer of Juniper Jones. And tonight we also have our moderator, Ayanna Tucker. Sorry about that. Before I properly introduce our guests, I do have some quick guidelines for our audience. If you would like to ask our speakers a question tonight, just use the Ask a Question function at the very bottom of the screen. You can also vote for any questions you'd like, and they'll make their way to the very top of the list. And if you're considering supporting our bookstore by purchasing a copy of tonight's featured book, please click on the green purchase button directly below the screen. And Vroman's will be doing more virtual events in the near future, and you can learn more about them on our website's calendar or by subscribing to our newsletter. And with that said, let me properly introduce our guests. Daven McQueen grew up outside of Los Angeles, California, and graduated from Brown University, where she earned a BA in Literary Arts and Economics. Her works on Wattpad include December, Beautiful Dreamer, and Superior, which received a Waddy Award for science fiction. And joining her tonight is our moderator, Ayanna Tucker, the Senior Talent Manager for Wattpad Studios. She manages a rotating roster of Wattpad's most influential rising stars, and her unique pathway into talent management began in social work until she decided to pivot and secure her honors bachelor's degree in communications at the University of Toronto. And with that said, I'm going to turn things over to our speakers. Enjoy the talk, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Hopefully everyone can hear me and see us. I'm actually very excited to moderate this discussion today. Essentially, this is for you all is going to just be a representation of me and Daven on a regular basis, talking about her book, as we do. Because I have the lovely honor of representing Daven for Wattpad and Wattpad Books, and I couldn't be more excited. And just to, she doesn't know that I'm going to do this, but just to add to her wonderful bio, Invincible Summer is her debut novel. And just to give you for those of you who have yet to read it, and I implore you to do that, I'm just going to read a few of the reviews that have come through since the release of her book.
Ayanna, so cute.
The Invincible Summer of Juniper Jones is a gorgeous, memorable story that deserves a place on both school and public library shelves. That was from School Library Journal, and it was a starred review. The underlying message of the story, that friendship is possible despite differences, and that everyone has the right to respect. It is one that resonates as much today as it did in Alabama in the 1950s. That's from the Canadian Review Materials. McQueen weaves a heartfelt narrative that examines friendship, otherness, and forgiveness. And that was another starter review from Booklist. And just to round it out, McQueen deftly balances the rollicking summer adventures of Ethan and Juniper with the gravity of racial discrimination. Ethan's retching initiation into what it means to be Black in the United States is handled with candor and force. This book provides a nuanced look at its characters, turmoil, guilt, fury, and love. And just dust off your shoulders, Daven, because that was from the Boston Globe. No big deal. So all the love that she deserves for her debut novel, The Invincible Summer of Juniper Jones. And I hope that we can have a fun and engaging conversation as the evening progresses. So let's just jump right into it. And listen, Daven is an expert at this point. She's done many discussions, many panels, and she's answered some of these questions a lot. But for those of us who don't know yet kind of the origins of The Invincible Summer of Juniper Jones, I just want everyone to understand this is a story that Daven started around her senior year of high school. And obviously some of the aspects of the story have evolved since then. But Daven, you need to share with everyone what prompts a teenager to write a fictional story about friendship during the Jim Crow era in the Deep South in the United States. As a teenager, I definitely was not thinking about this. I was probably cutting class and stressing about exams. You were writing a lovely Boston Globe starred reviewed novel. No big deal. Take us there. Tell us how it all started.
Sure. So, I mean, the first part of it is kind of silly. Like, there are a couple streets near my parents' house. One is Juniper and one is Jones. And I used to, when I was in high school, I would just like write down street names, and I would be like, okay, I'm gonna like use this as a character name later on. And I found those two streets, and I was just like, this would be such a good name for a character. So I'm gonna like name some character someday Juniper Jones. And like really the title came first because the Invincible summer part came from a quote by Albert Camus that is, in the depths of winter, I finally found that within me there lay an invincible summer. So I had this title, and I had no story. And so I was just thinking about like, what do I actually want to write about? And I wrote this story during NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, my senior year, which I used to do every year. And so I was like prepping for that and trying to come up with a story to go with this title. And I knew I wanted to write about a lake. I love lakes. And I had just taken American history, and, you know, we'd learned about the Jim Crow era, sort of, but it wasn't in as much depth as I wanted. And I felt like there was still a lot that I didn't know. And so I kind of wanted to explore that time period more, do that research, and set a story during that time. And then the final piece of it was that I grew up reading a ton, constantly, like under the table during class, and would get in trouble. But like, I hadn't read a lot of books by authors of color, and I definitely hadn't read a lot of books about characters of color, or especially biracial characters. And as a biracial person, I was really interested in kind of exploring that identity in a book, and like putting a character into a book that I could see myself in. And so that was kind of like the final piece.
Okay, that makes sense. I see the pathway there. You weren't just sitting around as a teenager being like, how can I change the world? Although in the end, I personally feel like you did. This is my unbiased opinion. Okay, great. So let's go to the story itself. Like, I feel like there are many dynamic characters in the book. Everything from the complex relationship that Ethan has with his Aunt Kara and Uncle Robert, to the town bully Noah, and obviously, of course, Ethan's parents. But let's discuss the main event, Ethan and Juniper. To say the narrative around Ethan is that of like a fish out of water, I truly think that that's an understatement. He is in a new place. He's learning about his extended family for the first time. And in the midst of all of this, he really is truly learning about himself, his race, his value on friendship, and any kind of unresolved issues that he has with his family and his parents. So please tell us the creation of Ethan. Like, why was it important to create such a dynamic character as the center point of this particular story?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think like as I was thinking about sort of the character that I wanted to focus on, I knew that I wanted the character to be biracial, a person of color, and also like most of the books that I'd read about people of color, which were usually written not by people of color, sort of shoved the characters into some kind of stereotype or just like caricature. And I really just wanted a character who was more than that and who was like an actual person. And I think, you know, like, I feel like part of coming to terms with identity and like dealing with everything that comes with it is so much about like navigating the relationships in your life. And so I wanted Ethan to like be able to have those deep and complicated relationships, and to surround him with characters who could be complicated too.
I love that. And I think when we think about kind of being teenagers, there's everything is very dramatic and we're very complex. And I think that you did that in a way that whether you're young or old, you really can see parts of yourself in someone like Ethan and how he's navigating that. I think you did a great job for that. Okay, I'm gonna really try to not just like compliment you this whole time, and it's just really hard.
It's okay, you can keep going.
Okay, so we can't talk about Ethan without talking about Juniper. I do feel like she was the perfect counterpart for a character like Ethan. She definitely brought like a lightness and a naivete to what, let's be honest, would be otherwise a pretty heavy narrative. What was it like trying to keep the character Juniper the light force in the story, but without making her similar to Ethan, not a caricature of herself or just like that kind of cliche Manny Pixie dream girl type character?
Yeah, so when I think of Manic Pixie Dream Girls, my like first thought is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which I love that movie, but like the character with the blue hair, I can't remember her name, is like very much a Manic Pixie Dream Girl, and kind of what I think of a Manic Pixie Dream Girl being is sort of this an idea of a girl instead of an actual, again, like an actual person. And so, you know, like with the stereotypes of a Manic Pixie Dream Girl, I've said it so many times now, and it's so long. With the stereotypes of that is like this, like, you know, the girl exists only to help the boy see the light, and like that's her only function. And like Juniper does play that role in some way with Ethan, but I think the difference that I tried to strike is that it's mutual, and like Juniper's not this like all-knowing girl who like can fix Ethan's life. Like she's also a flawed character, and they do like learn from each other. And I think also like they're kids, and like when I think of Manny Pixie Dream Girls usually, and maybe this, I don't know if this resonates for other people, but like I generally think of people like above the age of 16 or 18. And I think like a lot of the quirkiness of Juniper and just like the way she is also partly because she's like barely 14 years old.
That makes sense. Age definitely plays into that. And also her location, right? It's like a smaller town with less access to diversity and just other elements that Ethan might have experienced in his in the bigger city.
Totally.
Yeah, that's good answer. Okay. There's a question that came in that kind of is a great connection to this as well. And I don't know if you actually do have the answer to this, but I'm interested to hear what you have to say. Out of the characters that are in The Invincible Summer of Juniper Jones, who is your favorite character to write?
Let's see. I would say Ethan. I think like Juniper was interesting to write because she's so different from me, and like I was able to like pretend I'm like this extremely bubbly girl.
Oh wait, no, that's me. It's fine. Go.
Yeah. But I think like Ethan's character, especially, you know, I wrote the original draft my senior year of high school, and then coming back to it and doing edits again, it was really cool to like explore Ethan's character again as someone who had like grown. And you know, I think that a lot of the things that Ethan comes to terms with in the novel are things that like I was still figuring out when I was 17. And like, I mean, figuring out forever, like it doesn't stop. But like, I think, I feel like when I came back to it and I came to Ethan's character, I was like on the other side of something. And so like, I really enjoyed just like writing his character and like building in what I'd learned since I first wrote the story.
That's great. I love that. Okay, great. So now you've done the publishing process. We're on the other side of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think for people that have an aspiration, or even just the peak of the thought of like, this is a fun, interesting thing. I want to know from you, from the beginning to now, were there any major plot points or characters that had to be adjusted that were left on the editing floor between the original draft versus the published version? Something that people would be surprised to know.
Yeah, I feel like I feel like this is a pointed question because I feel like I know what you're referring to. Okay. So there was a part in the original draft, which Ayanna really liked, but I was like, can't keep this here. Where in the current draft as well, or draft, it's a book now. In the book now, like it, even in Juniper, there's a point where they go to Montgomery, Alabama, and kind of see the city together for the first time. And in the original draft, I had them get on a bus in Montgomery, and to sort of show like segregation on buses and stuff, and they are sort of harassed by this white man who takes their seat, and they go to sit in the back, and they sit next to a woman named Rosa, who I forget what exactly she says, but she talks to them about how like everything's gonna change soon, and so that, of course, was Rosa Parks. Very heavy-handed, but yeah, that that scene has a special place in my heart, but it had to go.
I don't miss that part. I really do. It's fine. And for context, for the people who might not know Wattpad or understand how it's kind of like the first iteration of a story before it goes through vigorous editing and then gets published. So Daven was a part of Wattpad, which is an online reading and writing platform. And this is where the story Juniper was kind of placed and open for public consumption. And on our site, you're able to add notes and comments and things like that. And let me just explain. The reason why I liked it in the initial version, which cannot be translated in the published version, is that in the note section, you added links to articles and discussion topics were happening around that particular scene that I thought was just such a really fun element that took writing and reading being such an insular experience to very much more of like a community discussion. And that's why I liked it, because for people who, like you said, a lot of our education is missing key points of African American history in particular. And those conversations can be had in, I know now, not always, but it can be had in such a lovely, informative, and meaningful way. And I just felt like that to me was really when I was like, wow, this book and this writer is special. So that's why I missed it. And also it's just funny. It's like a wink and a nod to like actual things.
It's like not even a wink and a nod. It's like an aggressive wave.
Like, all right, fine. And would you say that's the part that you're like, girl, what were you thinking? Like, why would you include that?
Yeah. I like reread it, and my editor had said like, maybe like don't have this in here. Like, it's up to you. And I reread it and I was like, oh my God, like what have I done?
All right. Okay, there's a question in here that kind of is still on the topic of like from draft to publishing that I think would be interesting to hear what you have to say about that. So the question in the Q&A section is, what was it like transitioning from writing online to publishing a physical novel?
Yeah, so I mean, when I was writing on Wattpad, which was like the entirety of my high school experience, I like would post chapters every couple days, and it was like this like I was finishing the story in real time, and people were reading it in real time as I was writing it, and so it was kind of like an instant gratification thing of like I'd post a chapter and then immediately I'd see what people think about it. And so there was like, that was a interesting thing, is like, it was very much writing in community, because I get feedback and stuff, and I would write I would like change things or go back and edit things based on feedback. And so like the biggest difference definitely is that there isn't that conversation in the same way, but I found that like editing the novel, it was very much like a community experience, like with my editor of you know, working through this book together and talking out like this one scene, or if I wanted to add this or not. And then I think like in terms of the consumption of it, like I said, Wattpad does have that like instant, like you post a new chapter and then people are like, oh my God, new chapter. And it's like very exciting. But I think it's different, but it's interesting to have now this novel that's like out in the world. In a lot of ways, I don't know what people are thinking, and it's just kind of, it's like not in my control anymore. But that's kind of cool, because I think it is really exciting to see people engage with it who I like never would have been connected with if it wasn't for the book. And it's like, I mean, it's different, but I think it's a good different. It does feel like the next step, I guess.
Great. I like that you didn't say it was so hard, I never want to go through that process again. It has changed me. My joy of being creative and storytelling has been just completely stomped out. So
it was hard. I did edit the novel while I was on my postgrad vacation in Southeast Asia, but it was worth it.
I love that. But it only gave me a miniature heart attack when you were like, I'm going to be traveling. And I was like, how are you going to commit to your deadlines? Deadlines, for anyone who is watching and listening and is an aspiring writer, like, please do your team a favor and just commit to your deadlines. Like, please. If Daven can do it traveling around the world and back and in school and graduating and exams, like, you could do anything. Like, please. And for the sanity of the people who support and love you, please do that. Okay, so this is all fun and games, but let's get a little bit serious here. It's no surprise what we've talked about, what the book is about. It is about the Jim Crow era. It is about racial tension, segregation, and kind of navigating the world, the United States in particular, at one of, I would say, arguably one of the hardest times for Black people in particular. And I think it's obviously today, many of the same themes are coming up and are ever present. The discussion around racial inequities, what it means to be a true ally versus a performative one. These are all things that are being talked about now, both in private and very much in public, thanks to technology. And we know that with Ethan and Juniper, some of that kind of comes to the surface in their friendship as well. And they do find their way around that. If you were writing this book in 2020, how would Ethan and Juniper's friendship fare in the summer of 2020? Do you think it would be an invincible summer as it was in 1955 when the story is placed?
Yeah.
No pressure.
That was the answer. Yeah,
Somebody
I mean, I think
in Juniper Zoom call.
Oh my god. She would do that for sure. Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think like thinking about it in the summer of 2020 is just like insane. I don't even know how to like process that. But if I generalize to like if Ethan and Juniper were in like modern times, and if the conversations around racial justice were what they are today, I think that they would have been a lot less naive because they were both. I mean, Ethan was naive about the extent to which he could experience racism, and Juniper was naive about Ethan's experience and experiences of other Black folks. And I think that, like, because of the internet and social media and all of that, like, they would both know a lot more. And I'm just imagining, like, they're friends and like they follow each other on Instagram, whatever. And Juniper posts a like very performative ally post about how she's together. I may not understand, but I stand. She posts that.
Right.
And
or she posts like Angela Davis, but like with no context.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I can see her doing something like that. And then I can also see Ethan like calling her out on it and her being defensive, but them talking through it. I think that their friendship would still be able to be as deep as it was in 1955. But I think the conversations they would be having would be different because they'd both be in different places. And I think that Juniper would have a little bit more pressure on her than I think I put on her in the book, because there's just stuff that she has to know at this point. And so I think like conversations about mistakes she makes would be a lot more complicated and like in depth, because there would be more expectations for what she knows and the ways that she's an ally.
Yeah. And I think for like when I think about it, like especially because I'm constantly reconciling how much teenagers put on the internet for public consumption. Every thought, every movement, every feeling, they have no qualms about putting that on the internet. And just knowing Juniper's personality, she would be that girl. She'd be like, today, like, oh God, what's happening is horrible. Everyone sign this petition. But like some of her naivete would start showing up. And I feel like that would definitely irk Ethan. Like it would be like a death to a petition because she didn't know any better, because she like, I just feel like it would be kind of a mess.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think they'd spend the whole time. There wouldn't be any. Well, I mean, in COVID, there wouldn't be any like Invincible Summer, like Invincible Summer activities. But yeah, I think they'd spend a lot of time arguing on a Zoom call.
Yeah, 100%. Or I wonder if they do like in the subtweets, like just like going at it with each other.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I don't know who Dory Carter is, but your comments
my cousin.
You're amazing, because yes, Juniper would be like, why is no one talking about this? And then Ethan would be muting her. Yes, I agree. Invincible. We'd have to call it something else. It wouldn't be Invincible. It would be like, I don't know.
The end of the world summer of Juniper Jones.
Yeah. Okay, so we still have we have quite a bit more time, and I know for me one of the parts of the story is, and again, it's so hard for me to like balance the line of like some people on this chat might not have read the book just yet or not completed it yet, so I don't want to give too much away. But there is a scene with Ethan. Ethan has a very troubling relationship with his parents. And I want to know from you, what was it like creating the dialogue and the circumstances around first Ethan and his father and Ethan and his mother? What was it like coming up with that story? And how did your parents feel reading that?
That's a good question. Mom and Dad, if you want to drop your answer in the chat, go ahead. Yeah, I like noticed in my writing a lot that I write about like dysfunctional parent situations a lot, even though that's not my experience. But I think like with Ethan and his dad, I mean, just kind of thinking about like parents I knew growing up like peripherally and stuff, and like not necessarily parents of biracial children, but just white parents in general, who mean very well, but also just don't know how to execute on supporting a child of color. And so I wanted to, I think really, especially in editing, I wanted to like dig a lot deeper into sort of the idea that he didn't understand totally what it was going to be like, and how much of that was like ignorance and how much of that was willful ignorance, and just like giving Ethan a chance to deal with this moment of you know, having this moment of reckoning about someone he loves, and like how they move past that. Like that was really important to me. And like I know we don't see like what their relationship is like after, but yeah, I mean, I wanted to like explore like the idea of forgiveness and whether that's necessary or not in every scenario. And then with his mom, well, actually, I don't know if people on this call know this, but in the original draft, Ethan's parents were together and they both decided to send him to Alabama, which just realistically didn't really make sense. And so like Ethan was kind of in Alabama, and the only real support he had was Juniper. And so in doing the edit and the rewrite, I really wanted to give Ethan another relationship with another Black person who like gets what he's going through and is able to like have the really candid conversations with him. And so, yeah, I mean, I wanted his mom to just be that person for him. And also, even though she's like kind of at a distance and they only have one real encounter in the book, just like giving him that space to have someone who understands what he's going through. That was definitely missing from the first draft, and that's something that I really wanted to highlight.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it added a level of like groundedness to him that I think he needed. And I think any human being would need in such an isolating experience, and that extended for the entire summer. So I mean, well, we've talked about this. That is like one of my all-time favorite scenes. And that dynamic, because I just feel like in life, especially with YA in particular, there's always that one very contentious conversation between the lead character, which is like the young person, the teenager, and their parent. And I think that that's very true to life. It's very much like they do not understand each other. They're speaking they're both communicating, but it's like they're speaking different languages. But then somehow, some way, there is kind of like a coming together moment where it's like it clicks and they kind of understand each other, even if it's just for a moment. And I think that you did well. I'll give credit to both you and the editor Courtney, who's also my friend, but whatever. I think you guys did a great job with that. Like for that scene alone, if you have not read the book, I implore you to read it. It reminds me of, if you read The Hate You Give, there's a scene with Star and her dad, and he's kind of like giving her a hard time about the guy that she's dating, and because she's dating a white boy, and the dad just says, well, I know this is probably not the reason, but I can't help but think that you're dating someone who is the complete opposite of me, because I'm not the perfect example of the type of man that you want to be with. Ugh. It's like those moments break my heart.
Yeah.
I always wonder like about the parents reading that and wondering how much of that they're kind of internalizing, in kind of seeing those words come out of like the person that they created. But I think that that's like such a great, one of my favorite scenes.
Thank you. My parents didn't say anything, but not about you, Mom and Dad.
They didn't. We'll wait for them to say something and share. But that is, for me, that scene is one of my special takeaways, because whether you're young or old, there is this like thing that we all go through with our parents, the expectations that we have on them, the expectations that they have on us. That's my takeaway. But for you, if Juniper Jones appears in a school curriculum, this is a question that's coming from the audience, what sorts of things would you want the students to take away from this story?
Yeah, it has been really cool. I have had some teachers reaching out to me saying that they're planning on teaching this book, including two of my grade school teachers, which is really sweet. I think like two main themes that come to me as like the most important ones. The first is that racism still exists. It's still present and prevalent, and even in reading a historical work or a historical fiction, there are still parallels that you can draw to the present day. And so I'd want students, I guess, to be able to see those parallels and to be able to see themselves in the characters, or at least to empathize with the characters. And the second one, which I've, in so many panels, tried to find like the perfect way to encapsulate this, but I just always say that friendship is magic. I am a big proponent of YA books about friends. And I think like that's a really, like having that as a model is just like important as a kid, like, because there's the idea, especially between boys and girls, that like they can't be friends with each other, or it has to be a romance. And I really want that to come across as well, that like Ethan and Juniper are just friends, and they have this like really great and wonderful friendship. And it doesn't need to be anything more than that.
I love that, especially for teenagers. Like it's very hard to kind of have the language to explain a friendship that is just that. If it's two different sexes essentially, and it's like not everyone has to be falling in love and be formulating every relationship because of their libido. It could be just a good, healthy friendship. And I mean, in adulthood, that those relationships are super important as well. So I love that as like a takeaway for sure. So let's talk about this friendship. This came up in the questions. The characters, Ethan and Juniper. What would be your dream cast? Which is funny, this is also one of my questions. For the character Ethan, Juniper, and any other one character that kind of stands out to you that you're like, yeah, I can physically see what actor would play this person.
So Ethan and Juniper I have. Ethan would be Justice Smith. He was in Paper Towns, the John Green adaptation. And he's been in other things that I can't think of right now. I think he'd be like the perfect Ethan. And then for Juniper, this kind of feels like a cop-out, but it is just like the right person. Anne Shirley, who plays Anne of Green Gables. No, her name's not Anne. Is her name Anne? Hold on.
I know who you're talking about.
Oh yeah, no, Amy Beck. Anne Shirley is the character. Amy Beth McNulty is the actress. And Anne of Green Gables is part of what inspired Juniper's character. And I mean, this actress has red hair, so, and just plays this like whimsical character. So those would be my two. I truly have not thought beyond that. I like.
You don't have
for everyone else.
You don't have an Uncle Robert in mind. I mean, in my mind, it's like actors from like back in the day, from like, what's that show called? Like All in the Family or something, that old kind of like, just says what's on his mind, sits in his like rocking chair every day. Is it All in the Family? I don't know. I didn't really watch them because I wasn't allowed to, but like I know of them. Very like hard on the outside, but like soft on the inside, kind of.
Yeah. I guess for like all the other characters, like for Uncle Robert, I just imagine like someone's uncle. And Aunt Cara is like someone's aunt.
Archie Bunker. Thank you, Vicky. Yes, the Archie Bunker. Daven's too young to know at all what I'm talking about, but
I've heard that name before.
That's how I picture Uncle Robert. Okay, great. Okay, I'm debating. I'm trying to like do a good balance of like questions coming in and then my own questions, and I'm trying not to monopolize the question period of this discussion. Okay. I mean, this is the $1 million question that you get asked all the time. I do know the answer to this, but I'm going to add another element to it. Ooh. Is there a sequel in the works for the Invincible Summer of Juniper Jones?
No.
The whole chat, everyone just left the room. Everyone is upset. Everyone is very upset. Okay. Everyone, it's okay. Let's take a moment of silence that there isn't a comparison of our favorite characters. Fine. Okay, fine. There's no second book in the works for these characters. But are you working on something else? Like, what is, now that for all of us who have or will finish absorbing the story of Juniper and Ethan, what can we look forward to sinking our teeth into next for our now new favorite debut author, Daven McQueen?
So I promised my mother that the next book would be Filipino, because my dad is Jamaican and my mom's Filipino, and my mom said that she felt like I was leaving her out to dry. So so my next book is going to be Filipino. And I've started writing it a little bit, and it actually on Wattpad, one of my very old books from like 2012 is this book called Juniper, no, Beautiful Dreamer. And it's about like demons and sleep paralysis. And it's, at the time I thought I was being so like edgy, but I've reread it and I'm like, this is so campy. But I'm kind of reimagining this story with a Filipino lead and using Filipino mythology and folklore as the basis for all the like paranormal stuff that's happening, and like changing the plot pretty significantly. But that's what I'm currently working on.
Okay. So very much your next work is very much under construction. So it'll be a while before we can get our hands on it. And as a voracious reader yourself, what is your advice for if we love this type of book, or this book specifically, what is a good second read to kind of sink our teeth into that's from like another author, just another book, just shouting out other stories that might be exciting?
Yeah, I mean, I would say my like top 3 favorite books of the year so far have been, well, this isn't like new this year, but Little and Lion by Brandy Colbert, which isn't historical fiction, but it's really good. And then, why am I blanking on this? Oh, Here Comes the Sun by Nicole Dennis Benn. Kind of historical fiction. It's set in the 90s in Jamaica. Also very good. And then a book that just came out recently, and I feel like everyone is talking about, The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett. Just blew my mind.
I swear we did not plan. I swear we did not.
Have you read it yet?
No, it's my next. This is like us on like a business call. This is my next book club book.
Oh, amazing. It's so good. It just like blew my mind. And that one is historical fiction. It's set in like the 60s to the 80s, I think.
Yeah.
And it's truly, it's so good.
It's literally, I couldn't not pick that, but I'm sure everyone feels this way, maybe not, but it's all over my timeline. Everyone in the world seems to be reading this book, and the description is great. I read the first chapter. I'm hooked. That is a good one.
Yeah, we'll need to debrief after you read it, because it's wild.
I mean, I'll probably invite you to our book club conversation. You know how fun those get. Anyways.
Yeah.
Those are good suggestions. I love those. Okay, so we're getting close to the end here. And I'm like actively trying to not present questions that I know will just go on and on and on about, but it's very hard. We're very talkative. All right, okay. I think the most important thing that we want to kind of take away is for any kind of, well, first let's talk about the process for people that would be interested in being writers themselves. Like, what sort of advice would you give, or tips and tricks would you give if people are starting out as writers and kind of want to jump into it? In the questions we have, if someone is attempting to do NaNoWriMo for the first time, what's kind of like a couple of tips and tricks you would give for first-time writers? Like, committing to an entire novel is a feat, and that literally is step one. So what is the first piece of advice that you would give them?
I think the biggest thing, especially with doing NaNoWriMo, but I think with like writing your first book in general, is just that you have to like remove the part of yourself and it's easier said than done, that's like critical of every single word you put down. And I feel like I've gotten worse at this as I've gotten older. When I was in high school, I was like putting Rosa Parks on the bus with everyone, like uninhibited. But I think that like uninhibitedness, if that's the word, is something that like really lends itself well to being a first-time writer, because you're just kind of writing, and maybe it's not good, maybe some of it's good, maybe none of it's good, but the words are out there. And I think that like once you have the words on paper, it's a lot easier to go back and make them the words you want them to be. And so, yeah, my advice would just be to, boring advice. My advice is to write, but to write without being critical. Yeah. But without being like critical of yourself the entire time as much as possible. And then also like finding other people who write with you, or even just like friends who like to read, who like want to read your writing. I think like that's a really big part of what made Wattpad so special to me, is just having that community of writers around me, and some people that I'm like still friends with to this day. And so, yeah, I think having that community of writers is really motivating to keep writing.
Yeah, and I would say I'm not a writer, but obviously I work with many writers, some who are very self-sufficient and work very well, kind of being on their own, coming up with their ideas and seeing it through to the end. But obviously by working at Wattpad, where it is a social platform, it has opened up the world to people that do need a bit more encouragement and do need a little bit more of a community to keep it going. That's kind of the common thing that I hear all the time is, the readers help me keep going. The readers help me create that next chapter. The readers helped even direct the way that I want the story to go, or where I thought it was supposed to go, but then it kind of changed. Because even if it's not necessarily the audience that you were thinking is the one that you were writing for, it's always good to have people to support you and question things and just kind of keep that momentum going. So whether you are someone who is like, I want to do it all at once and then get feedback after, or kind of do chapter by chapter just to see how it goes, I think finding what makes sense for you. And I feel like who the type of person that you are based on like how you did school, or if you're a very social person, or if you're someone who's more kind of introverted and cerebral and you kind of think things through a lot more, just kind of find your stride. Now with the great thing about technology is that there is a place essentially for everyone to kind of find the place that kind of works best for them. And then just get it started. Like, I don't think, if maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think when you came up with Juniper, you were like, yeah, in a few years it'll be published and I'll be doing interviews literally every week for the last 4 months, talking to every place that's willing to hear me talk about my book. But it can happen. And maybe talk a little bit about even getting to the point of like, you were just writing on an online platform for free, for fun, in the midst of like school and working and whatever, and then kind of hearing that somebody wanted to publish your work. What was that experience?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure you were the one who told me. And I feel like I'd had hints of foreshadowing that like something was about to happen in the conversations we had like the months leading up to it, but I didn't know what it was. But like at the time,
I'm not good at surprises. I'm always I have to talk to you. Are you free literally in 12 hours? It might have to do with your book.
Yeah, so I feel like I knew something was coming. But it was my senior year of college. I was about to like start writing a whole thesis. I like hadn't really thought about this book that much in a couple years. And so like, I think my first thought was like, what? Like that book, my book, that one, like the one I wrote when I was 17. But like, I think then it just got really exciting because I like went back to the characters and to the plot and everything, and remembered like how much I loved them, and like how fun it was to write that. So yeah, it was wild, but it was really exciting.
And still exciting, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we have exactly 5 minutes left. I've answered all the questions that have come through. So if anyone has any last minute questions, please speak now. Or this is where we bid you all adieu. And
hello again. Hi. Thank you so much. That was such a fun talk. I mean, like it was so great. And thank you to everyone who tuned in and gave such great questions. And again, if you'd like to support our bookstore by purchasing a copy of The Invincible Summer of Juniper Jones, just click on the green purchase button directly below the viewer screen. It'll take you to our website where you can complete your purchase. And also, we'll be continuing to do more virtual events as time goes on. So our next event is scheduled for tomorrow, August 12th at 6 p.m. Pacific time with Akweke Emezi and Carla Bruce Eddings. And again, you can look up more information on virtual events on our website. And with that said, thank you so much to everyone who tuned in, and stay safe, everyone. Have a good evening.
thanks everyone for joining
you.